So, hello everyone. I am Sebastian Cater. I'm Head of UK Theatre and Workforce Development, and I am really happy that you're joining us today for our webinar. This is Removing Barriers, and this is the second in a series of four series presented by Michèle Taylor, who I will introduce you to shortly. Michèle is an agent for change and very heavily involved with Ramps on the Moon, and I'm sure she'll be drawing us some of those examples in the talk. Just a few housekeeping notes. If you haven't done one of these before, I know some of you are doing several of this series, which is great. So you're following the whole run. This should last about 30 minutes, and we can't hear or see you. So that's why using the chat box is a great way of letting us know that you're there. But you're also able to ask questions through the Q&A box. So if you just hover your cursor over the bottom of your screen, you'll see Q&A appear. And so you can ask a question, and in there you can ask it as yourself, or you can ask it anonymously. So you can either ask something throughout the session, or just wait until the end. We'll have a few minutes at the end just to let you ask questions. So you can keep things bubbling away, and maybe we answer some of them during it, or if you want to just, yeah, you can save it to the end. That's all good. It's all good. We will be recording this as well. So as with all Theatre Means Business webinars, this will be captioned after this and then available on the website. So theatremeansbusiness.info, it'll be available for you to see, along with the other webinars in this series and all the other ones in the series from May and June this year. We also have Miriam on hand, who's handling the technical issues from UK Theatre. So hopefully we should all be fine from that side. Okay, so I know a lot of you have been on the previous one of these, so I'm not going to do too much sort of introduction really. Suffice to say, just we're really grateful that you've joined us, and this is an initiative that's being created by SOLT and UK Theatre as a way of supporting the sector in its time of need. And we're really super thankful for Michèle Taylor to be joining us again. Michèle has given us her time for this, and these issues that we're covering in these webinars are really crucial. And yeah, these are just a nice sort of introduction to some of the sort of the headlines, if you like, for the importance of removing barriers in our organisations. So without further ado, I will now hand you over to Michèle.
Thank you, Sebastian, and hello everybody. I'm going to start sharing my screen in just a moment. But firstly, just a reminder that if you haven't already seen the first Removing Barriers webinar, then do have a look at that one when it's up, when the recording is up, because it will amplify and underpin quite a lot of what I'm going to say today. So let me start to share my screen, and then we'll get going. There we go. I'm just going to make sure I can see the chat box as well. So I will keep half an eye on the chat box. I can't promise to see everything that comes up on it, but I will keep half an eye on it, just so that if you want to question anything as we go along, I'll do my best to capture those. But as Sebastian said, if I don't, then it's not going to get missed. Someone at Sebastian and Miriam will capture them. So your question hopefully will get logged. So today's session is about removing barriers. It's specifically about your buildings and how you can work within your buildings to ensure that your building stock, your site, your physical site, doesn't throw barriers up in the way of disabled and deaf people. We're going to be addressing two specific questions. There we go. Two specific questions. We're going to be looking at the question of the importance of the buildings that we inhabit as theatre makers, and we're going to be looking at universal design as a useful approach. It's really important to say that the social model, which I talk about in the first of these webinars, is, like I said, it absolutely underpins even those two specific questions and even the principles of universal design. So I'm not going to summarize the social model, but what I will say is that fundamentally, the social model says, I have medical conditions. Those are the things that I have. I am disabled by barriers within the environment. Now, there are loads of implications of the social model as opposed to the medical model in the way that I've described it. I have medical conditions. I am disabled by barriers within the environment. The really important one in the context of talking about your buildings is that essentially that we talk about your buildings. You don't need to get into conversations with people about their medical conditions. What you need to be having conversations with people about are your buildings and their experiences within your buildings and the details, the features of your buildings. So I'm going to unpack that in the next 20 minutes or so to give you some pointers. So the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to use a poll. So here we go. The question is, I hope you can all see that, what percentage of disabled people are wheelchair users? Is it 4%? Is it 14%? Is it 44%? Is it 64%? Is it 84%? Are you able to see that? Yes. So what percentage of disabled people are wheelchair users? 4%, 14%, 44%, 64%, 84%. Just take a few moments and let me know what you think. Okay, so we've got 17 people. Okay, so you've all voted. Brilliant. Thank you very much. So the results are that 10 of you think it's 4%, 7 of you think it's 14%, 44% of you, 3 of you think it's 44%, and none of you think it's 64 or 84%. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to close that window now, and we're going to look, share the results. There we go. We're going to look at, oh, some of you didn't see the poll. Sorry about that. Okay, so we've got these figures: 4%, 14%, 44%, 64%, 84%. The truth is, the fact is that 4% of disabled people are wheelchair users. 4% of disabled people. Not 4% of the general population, but 4% of disabled people. Now, that's really important, and it's absolutely fundamental as you start to look at your buildings and you start to think about disabled people's experiences within your buildings. Because obviously, what I'm not suggesting is that everybody takes a step back and thinks, oh, well, that's okay, we don't have to worry too much about wheelchair users. They're only 4% of the disabled population. What I am saying is that I often have one of two conversations with organisations, and I characterise those conversations as being, on the one hand, Michèle, we've done disability, look at our ramps and toilets. To which I have to say, well, that's great, but what about everybody else? Or I get the reaction that says, Michèle, we'd love to do disability, but unfortunately we can't. Look at our listed building. And my response to that is, it may well be that the nature of your building makes it impossible for you to make changes so that people who use wheelchairs, people with mobility issues, can get into and around your building. But there will still be plenty of things you can do for the other 96%. In other words, both of these reactions are assuming that when we talk about disabled people, we're primarily talking about wheelchair users. And that can very often almost kind of give us an excuse to think that either we can't do it or we have done it. Let me just scroll through this to get to the next slide. And what I really want you to remember is that this isn't just about wheelchair users. This is about more subtle things. It's about other things. It's about thinking more broadly. It's about thinking more creatively. I'm going to give you some examples. Some of these, on the face of it, look as though they're only about wheelchair users. But let's think more creatively, more broadly than that. So this first image, this is a fairly newly built museum and art centre in Sweden, actually. And this staircase is the very first thing I see when I come into the building. And what this absolutely illustrates for me is the importance of asking yourself the question, what story does our building tell about who we are as an organisation, about what our values are as an organisation, and about who we exist for? Now, this building, the photo that you can see in front of you, there is a lift. I can get up to the upper floors. There is a lift. It's a little difficult to find, and it's definitely not immediately obvious when I first come through the door. When I first come through the door, it's that staircase that I see. That is a very, very, very extreme statement to me of whether or not I'm welcome. And what that staircase says is that actually I'm not very welcome. Let's take a look at this picture. This picture is a picture of an adapted toilet cubicle. Now I see variations on this very, very often. This is the most extreme I've ever seen, I have to say. But this is an adapted toilet cubicle that has not only a step ladder inside it, it also has a chest freezer. Now, obviously that's ridiculous. Obviously that's unacceptable. However, just think about how many times you may have looked into or used an adapted toilet cubicle and it's had a mop bucket in it, or it's been the place where maybe even a box of print has been stored. That matters. It matters, of course, because it makes the thing impossible to use, but it also matters because of the story it tells. It matters because it tells me a story that my requirements, my needs, my comfort actually is not terribly important. Here's another one. This is an entrance with glazed doors. They're glazed sliding doors. It's a level entrance. There's a really nicely countersunk mat just inside the entrance. There's a lot about this entrance that is really great. But as the photo shows, there is a great deal of reflection and glare on those glass doors. You have to be really careful using glass doors, using glass at all in your building. It's not that it's a bad thing, it's not that it shouldn't be done, but it just needs a great deal of care in terms of the amount of reflection that it throws and the amount of glare that it throws. And also, glass as an entrance can be very confusing. Glass around a stairway can be very confusing. It can really muddle the routes of navigation through a building. So that's really important to think about. This picture shows a blue badge parking bay. Unfortunately, at the time this picture was taken, there had been a snow dump. And the people who were responsible for clearing the snow in the car park thought that it was a great idea to clear the snow onto the blue badge parking bay. Again, when I arrived and I needed to park my car in the blue badge bay, this made it impossible. I couldn't use the bay. It conveys a really significant message. And then another important message is that you can sometimes look at something and at face value think it's great. I just want you to look at this image. It did the rounds on social media a while back. It regularly does the rounds on social media. It's a concrete flight of steps that has been configured and designed with inbuilt ramps. And it kind of looks attractive in a way. And a lot of people got very excited about this and circulated it as an example of how you can integrate so-called access. I'm going to talk about that word in a moment. How you can integrate access in a way that is aesthetically pleasing. However, if you look again at that photograph, frankly, it's just downright dangerous, and it doesn't have so many of the things that people other than wheelchair users need in order to be able to access that upper level. There are no visually contrasting strips on the edges of the stairs. There are no handrails on the ramps. There are very few handrails on the stairs themselves. There's no visual demarcation of the ramps. I could go on, but my point is that we need to look beyond the obvious. And we need to make sure that we talk to users themselves in order to make sure that we are not just imposing what we think is going to work, but that we're getting real feedback in terms of what is and what isn't a good idea. So let's talk about universal design. This is something that you may or may not be familiar with. I will send you some links to some further information about universal design. You can Google it, there's tons of information. Basically, universal design absolutely embodies the social model, because universal design refers to the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. And it seems to me that is absolutely what we should be striving for in our buildings, on our sites, that everything that we design, and by the way, universal design doesn't just relate to buildings, but in the context of today's webinar, that everything that we design about our buildings and our sites, everything is usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialist design. And if we do that from the beginning, if we do that from the very inception of everything that we design, then we are going to create an environment that is flexible, that is responsive to what people need, that we understand, that we know, that we can talk to people about, and that people can feel comfortable in. Our buildings need to be as comfortable as possible for as many different people as possible. And universal design could be a really useful key to that. So it's not about special requirements. Absolutely it isn't. It's about embedding everybody's requirements into the design rather than having to signpost some people to a specific part of the building or a specific facility. It's a fundamental condition of good design. And if an environment is accessible, usable, convenient, and a pleasure to use, it will be beneficial to everybody. So this is going to create a building that is much easier and more pleasant for everybody to use. And I think this quotation by Elaine Ostroff, who's done a lot of work on universal design, is absolutely brilliant in this context. Universal design assumes that the range of human ability is ordinary, not special. And I love that. And I think we would do well to incorporate that kind of ethos into all the work that we do and into all the ways that we support that work. So let's look at a couple of examples of universal design. So here we've got, it's the interval, and we've got somebody holding up a sign that says the show will commence in 3 minutes, please take your seats. So what's happening here is that the announcement that is usually only sound-based, comes over the tannoy, has actually been translated into a visual announcement as well. Brilliant. That is going to be usable, understandable, perceptible to many, many more people. Here we've got a sign to a chill-out room during a performance, so that if people need during the interval to actually spend some time away from their seat, but not in the hubbub of the bar, and maybe it's cold outside or they don't want to go outside or whatever, there is a chill out room, there is a room they can go in order to be quiet. I love this one. This one is great for me. This is simply some coat hooks, and as well as coat hooks at the level that you would usually expect to see a rack of coat hooks, there are some that have been put at a lower level. It's so simple, and that honestly, when I saw that, I was so happy. It's just brilliant. Coat hooks that I can reach, fantastic. And another idea, this is from a museum, is a very, very simple way of supporting people, helping people, enabling people to navigate their way around a space by using colour on the floor. It's quite attractive. You might not like the colours, but it's quite attractive. It's in keeping with the rest of the decor. And it clearly shows your pathways through the building. And I think that's fantastic. So that's a few specific examples of how you can look around your building and think in terms of, where are the barriers in our building? What can we do? What can we design in to make sure that our building is welcoming and usable and works for as many people as possible? So what is it you need to do? I would suggest that in the first instance, there are 5 things that you can usefully do. Firstly, assess your current situation. Look around your building and notice what it is you are already doing well, and ask yourselves, how can we do that even more? Notice the things that you are not necessarily doing well, that don't work for as many people as you'd like, and then provide accurate and honest information. Now, I understand that this is a really difficult thing that I say to organisations, but honestly, if there are barriers in your building, whether that's narrow doorways, changes in level that are not navigable by ramps or lifts, whether it's dark areas, whatever it might be, tell people. I would far rather know what I'm going to encounter before I actually get into your building. Thirdly, talk to people, consult with people, set up user groups, and talk to professionals. So user groups are absolutely fantastic. They're invaluable. They're absolutely necessary. They do not take the place of paid experts, however. User groups are there to talk about their personal experience. Paid experts, disabled experts, will be people who know about broadening that information and that knowledge and that experience into areas other than those that actually relate to them personally. Plan for how you're going to make changes, prioritize, and we can talk about that in the questions if you'd like to, and take the opportunities as they arise. If you're refurbing, if you're decorating, if you're extending, if you've got any kind of projects that are going to alter the fabric of your building, take those opportunities. And I think that there are 4 principles. There are 4 C's. I like alliteration. Choice. Offer as much choice, as many ways into your building and the facilities that your building offers as possible. Consultation. I've talked about that a bit. Curiosity. Bring curiosity to your consultation. Also bring curiosity when you're thinking about how you can achieve the changes you want to make. And equally bring creativity to the changes you want to make. I said I was going to come back to the word access. I do just want, before I wrap up, I do just want to make a plea, really. Be really careful about the language that you use. Be really careful if you use the word access, because it's really not very helpful to me. Be particularly careful if you use the phrase fully accessible, because actually it doesn't mean anything. If you have a building that you tell me is fully accessible, you might think I'm going to take that as reassurance. Actually, in all honesty, what I'm going to think is, okay, I'm not sure they really know what they're talking about then. Because fully accessible, what does that mean? I'm still not going to be confident that that building is actually fully accessible for me, because what I'm going to assume is that you mean fully accessible for wheelchair users. Rightly or wrongly, that's what I'm going to assume. So just the final thing that I want to do is to share a quotation from Vince Lombardi, who apparently was an American football coach. Who knew? But I love this. I think this is, again, something really important in this context. Perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we can catch excellence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michèle. that was another inspiring talk. Those photos are sort of terrifying and shocking, but also, you know, I think you just can't help but look at them and go, clearly there is room for improvement here. So we've got time for a little question or two. So just to remind us, there is the facility to ask questions at the bottom of your screen. So if you just hover over the bottom of the Zoom screen, and Q&A will appear. So if you just click on that, and then you can ask a question through there, either as yourself, or if you want to ask it anonymously, that's completely cool. I know sometimes with disability and access and this sort of area, some people feel a bit uncomfortable and they're not sure if they're saying the right thing. So I just want to say, you know, there's no such thing as a wrong question. You know, as Michèle was mentioning, curiosity is a really important principle. And so this is a really great opportunity to ask any question that's on your mind. And also, I'm sure it's the same question that everyone else has got on their mind as well. So do use this as an opportunity to ask anything that you're not sure about, or things that you've always had on your mind, and if you want to, you can ask it anonymously, so that's cool. So just while everyone's thinking about any potential questions, and also just to say, yeah, there is the facility to put the opportunity to put a comment or a chat in the chat box, and in the same way, just the chat function at the bottom of your screen. So yeah, while you're thinking of any questions, we've had a few sent through in advance, which is great. So I'm just going to ask one of these, Michèle. As we know, a lot of our beautiful theatres are very old and very matcham designed for, you know, Victorians, and you know, things have moved on, luckily, in some ways. But I wonder if a lot of people feel held back by the fact that their building is listed. I mean, yes, it's beautiful. Yes, there's all this gorgeous loveliness, but of course, because of all the reasons you've talked about, it doesn't really work in the modern world. So, you know, I'm sure you hear that a lot, but is there, what's the sort of best way of dealing with that, perhaps, if that's something that people are feeling is holding them back from making changes?
Yeah, thanks for that question. The first thing that I would say is look at what you can do. So don't forget, 4% of disabled people are wheelchair users. So if you're looking at your building and you're thinking, this is not going to work for disabled people, just narrow that down, because it's only some disabled people that it's not going to work for. That's not that that doesn't matter, of course it matters, but for now, look at what you can do. Remember that the social model is absolutely solutions focused, so look for the solutions you can reach. The other piece of advice that I would give you is really interrogate the details of your listing, because it will be specific. So I know one organisation that felt really thwarted because they wanted to put a great big map on the wall, a great big kind of tactile map on the wall, and they weren't able to because their listing said that they couldn't put anything in the wall. But when they checked the detail, what they were not allowed to drill into was the brickwork. It didn't mention the mortar in between. Perfect. They could make it work. Just
requires a little investigation and curiosity. That's great. I'm looking at time, and we're getting loads of questions, which is great. So as Michèle mentioned, so we will keep a hold of these, and we'll be able to get back in touch with everyone about these questions. But I just think there's a nice one to end off with, which is from Natalie. I think you might like this one, Michèle. The question is, where do you recommend we start looking at consultants to engage with on this?
I'd be really happy to advise on that. Happy for you to get in touch with me. And there's also the Centre for Accessible Environments in London, who are really good, and they train access consultants. There is a directory of access consultants. The Centre for Accessible Environments has a whole listing of access consultants. But primarily, I would say talk to other people who work in theatres, and ask them who they've used. I would say make sure you use someone who understands the nature of your organisation. So if you're working in a theatre or an arts centre, someone who really understands how people use and behave in theatres and arts centres.
Great. And yeah, you're right. It's not a one size fits all approach, is it? And actually, even if you had a consultant come in a few years ago, you know, the world has changed, best practice has changed, so it's definitely worth getting a sort of a refresher, if you like. So listen, I'm afraid we have run out of time, but as I mentioned, we'll be able to, we'll pick up all these questions, and we'll be able to come back to you with them after this. But I just want to say thank you so much to Michèle for another stimulating session. So thank you. Thank you to everyone for participating on this live session, and thank you to all those of you watching this recorded in the future. Michèle is, you're able to get in touch with Michèle through her email, which is michelle.taylor. So Michèle is 1 L. So michelle.taylor@me.com. So do drop Michèle a line, and also we'll put the contact details in the pack afterwards, in the email afterwards. And just to say, yeah, there's more theatremeansbusiness.info events coming up, as you can see on the slide. So that's just coming up now. This is, as I mentioned previously, this is the second of 4. And so tomorrow, same time tomorrow, we have Removing Barriers Part 3, and this is looking at marketing communications. You're still able to book for that. So just go to theatremeansbusiness.info and you can just sign up there. It's free, as was today. Also next week, the 4th of these sessions is focusing more on employment. So that's Tuesday, 2nd of June. And then a week or so later, Tuesday, 16th of June, we've got Reopening, Planning and Forecasting for Recovery with Baker Richards. So do check out the website, and you can find all those details there. So that just leaves it for me to say thank you so much again to Michèle, and thank you to everyone for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, maybe tomorrow.